the age of the knowledge worker is over. Now is the
Right.
age of the wisdom worker. And it's absolutely true. And that wisdom comes through the inner work. It comes through relating and relationship. And it comes through the sacred also. This is really what's being asked of us right now.
Welcome to The Deep Coach, the podcast where we explore the transformational journeys that shape us and that propel us to change the world. I'm your host, Jonathan Hermida, and in each episode, we sit down with those who have journeyed into the depths of spiritual transformation and who are now reshaping the world through their presence and their work. In listening to these incredible human beings, you'll find insight, inspiration, and practical tools to support your journey as a coach and as a human being. Today's guest is Ger Daly. Ger is a leadership and transformational coach who truly walks the walk. This is a man of immense wisdom, a husband, a father, and someone who is deeply committed to his own transformational journey. In fact, 2 years ago, him and his wife Sarah decided to move to a remote island off the coast of Ireland. This is an island with about 100 inhabitants, so you can imagine what life is like there. They moved there with their 2 children to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city and to really land in a place where they can live in deep connection with the earth and with themselves, and to give their kids an opportunity to truly connect with themselves before entering into the inevitable digital world that we're all entering into. So in this episode, we talk about Ger's journey to that island and to transforming lives, some of the difficulties he's encountered along the way, including his daughter Annie's prenatal diagnosis with a fetal fatal abnormality, and how at 7 she is a living miracle. We talk about, as I mentioned, AI and how to raise kids in this new era, and a whole lot more. I'm really excited for you to experience Ger's presence. Enjoy. Ger, it is an absolute pleasure to be here with you. And as we do at the beginning of all of these episodes, I'd like to ask, who was Ger prior to the onset of your transformational journey?
Hi. That version of Ger is very different to who I am now, but I hold him dearly with me, because who I was then feels like I had gone far away from myself, and not even really fully knowing who I was, what was important to me, what I wanted, even though I was striving so much all the time. And I'm probably talking about myself in my right up into my early 30s, kind of striving for success, whatever that was. And I didn't even really know what that was. What I was informed about success by my, environment, my upbringing, who I was around was, that's kind of money and material things. And also recognizing that inside, well, actually not recognizing it, but experiencing a tension inside of, well, actually, is this what I want? What do I want? What's important to me? So it just led me to experience a lot of upset and stress. And this affected all aspects of my life, not just work, but relationships, just overall direction, where I was putting all of my energy in trying to distract myself in so many different ways, conflicting ways, actually, be it through exercise and working out, or, drinking copiously and socializing and dabbling in drugs and just abusing alcohol for distraction and numbing. And I guess it got to a point where I needed to do something for myself. This isn't working for me. That took me a long time to get that this really isn't working for me. I wasn't sleeping well. I was stressed. I was, having these kind of ailment, skin conditions, and, so I decided that I wanted to, maybe just even get something simple like a massage, just to, I just needed something nourishing, something soothing and relaxing, just to calm something. I didn't have language for it. I didn't have words for it, but I needed something just to settle myself and find a bit of ease. And there was a lot I didn't know at the time about what I can do for myself in that regard. All I knew was I'll just go for a massage. And there was a woman here in Galway where I live, and she was phenomenal at what she did in massage. And she said to me, "There's this other practice that I'm training in at the moment. It's called Reiki. Do you mind if I try it on you?" And I just said, "Yeah, go." I trusted her. And so when she put her hands over me, Alma was her name. And she was really seemed a bit kind of perplexed and little trying to figure out, sense what was going on. And she said that the closest way she could describe it was that I was like a ping pong machine inside. And not knowing anything about what she was talking about, I knew exactly what she meant, because that's what I felt like inside. My nervous system was all over the place. And she recommended I go to someone or an intuitive nutritionist, because I was having a lot of stomach problems and skin problems. I went to this nutritionist. Her name escapes me right now, but April Dannon was her name, actually. April Dannon. And she was amazing. And while everything was focused on my nutrition, it was totally holistic energy work. And a lot of energy moved in the session. A lot of emotion came to the surface. And she also recommended that I speak to a counselor. And again, I completely trusted her. And not that I hadn't thought of this before, but it landed with me. So, and all of this was just happening at the right time for me. I was just ready. I was ready for change, ready for something different. And I went to a counselor very soon after that. And this is about 15 years ago. And I went to see this man, Sam Butt, who's now working in the States. And he brought me in, invited me in, sat me down. And I was a bit anxious, a bit nervous, didn't know what to expect. And he asked me how I was. And just the particular way that he said to me, asked me, "How are you?" There was an extra layer of like a transmission in those words from him. And when I began to speak, I very soon began to mumble, and just this upsurge of emotion and tears came out of deep inside of me. And I cried and bawled solid for about 45 minutes. And this was with me for years, decades. I couldn't rationalize it, and I wasn't even trying to. This man was just holding me in that, and not trying to make me feel better, not trying to fix anything. And it was really it was such catharsis and such a relief and release that I knew I needed more. And so I went back for more counseling a number of times with that same man. I think he asked me at the end of that session, "Do you want to come back for another one?" I said, "Can I come back tomorrow?" I just knew I needed it, and so then, and that very soon after that, I felt I got what I needed in a short amount of time with him. And not long after that, I entered into my first real significant relationship. I was not capable of holding a stable, healthy relationship up to that point, up to my mid-30s. And we're still together today. Yeah. So, and that was the start of a whole other journey. And together, my wife Sarah and I, we've been on this journey very much together. It's what's bonded us. We went on to explore. Rather, a certain amount of work gets you so far at the stage you're at before the next step is necessary, because it will feel like the old stuff is coming up again, and maybe not coming up the same old way, but it's coming up in a way that needs to be looked at differently and to be healed further. And so I began to explore meditation, because I started having, the old stuff was coming up again. I wasn't sleeping. I was having a lot of trouble sleeping, a very light sleeper. That's why so much exercise, I felt that was my way to, it was not so much fitness and strength and really feeling good, so I could sleep, and the same with alcohol, just so I could sleep. So, and again, recognizing this can't go on, and there's more as well. I went to a meditation class. It was a mantra meditation, and that night, I had the best sleep that I had had in many years, simply by sitting, meditating in a group. And that was enough for me to keep going back, and so much more. There was a cascade of healing and impacts in my life that went on. I committed to that meditation for several years after that, and opened up a whole world of other practices as well. Different types of energy healing, family constellations, ancestral work, going on retreat, going on to visit spiritual places, been to India several times, and really, really powerful experiences with many other people who are going through their own stuff. But you really recognize the universality of this type of journey. We've all got stuff, and we've all got trauma. All of our ancestors have experienced trauma, and it's really, it comes to a point where someone along the line has the capacity and the inclination to feel that pain and feel the hurt that can heal it, for not just for yourself, but for them and for our children and beyond. So and so all of that, the next stage of my journey really was coaching, and how I could really not just work on myself, the work continues on myself, but hold other people along the journey, support other people along the journey. And it was, I took and my life was completely changing. Sarah and I got married in 2017. Within a few months, I left a job that I had been in for 13 years. And in those next few years, we had kids, we moved around, lived in different places, continued to work on ourselves. COVID happened. We're building our own businesses, and mine focusing as a coach, working with leaders, other coaches, anybody who's really open and ready to explore their inner world. And this really has come through the door opened in this work for me through the courses at the center and Leon's work, and the DCI. So it's just about 2019, I started training as a coach, and I just took to it. I love it. Loved the space and what could be experienced with people, and where people can get to through coaching. But I always felt like I'm not really one for setting goals and planning, and that I was a bit at odds in that regard with coaching in myself. And I came across an article written by another coach, Stephen Lane, who's come through the DCI and that other same coaching institute I trained in Kingstown College. And Stephen had just completed the DCI, and what he wrote about Leon's practices and the shift in being just struck a chord. How I just knew it in deep inside. This is the coaching for me. This deep transformational coaching. And I signed up for the next DCI, even though that particular cohort was Asia Pacific. So I had to get up at 1:00 in the morning every Wednesday for 6 months to do the course. But it was absolutely worth it, and I would do it again. And I've been on a whole journey since then. Continued the training and transformational coaching through the center and through others. Expanded it to include vertical development, leadership development. Trained up in several psychometric assessments and also incorporating breathwork and meditation into the work. But yeah, my journey very much continues, and I recognize that it's a lifelong journey, really. And it isn't by any means a straight line. But it can be a bit of a roller coaster at times. But right now, I don't see life as being any other way, and I'm quite satisfied and happy in that.
You mentioned a cascade of healing at one point, the phrase a cascade of healing, and that's what it really sounds like from the moment you met Alma. Was it Alma? That was her name, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Are you aware of what the name Alma means in Spanish?
I'm not, no.
Which is incredible that this was the catalyst for you. So Alma means soul, literally soul.
Wow.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah. It's so apt. Yeah.
It's so apt. So
And
soul was the catalyst journey.
Yeah. And that's so much part of this work and this journey. It's connecting to your soul, calling in the soul, which we can feel so often very separate from, even if we can put that word on whatever our consciousness is or whatever we are connected to. It is soul work and soul journey, for sure.
Yeah. You shared so much that I wanna double click into several pieces. Yeah. One of the things that I'm curious about, growing up in Ireland and Galway, and the culture there in terms of pub life and the way folks are maybe deal with their own pain and traumas, and that you were a part of. What was it like when you began to sort of awaken out of that world in terms of the relationships that you had established? What was your relationship with the environment and culture that you were still in, but that you were moving away from?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because it's one of the biggest shifts that happens. And it's not that there's anything wrong or any judgment, but when you start to look at your life, your relationships, how you're living and socializing, what way you're working, how you're turning up, and you see that it can be a different way, and it needs to be a different way, that you want it to be different. This isn't working anymore, where maybe at once for a period of time it did. What has been familiar, some of it falls away. It has to. And that can include relationships, can include friendships. Maybe those relationships remain, but your role changes significantly. You're not the person you were to them any longer. And sometimes it happens quietly over time. Sometimes it can feel abrupt. very sudden. At other times, we can't always tell how others are going to receive us and how we're being different. And when I mean different, we're actually becoming more ourselves, and we're not the person that they thought they knew any longer. And that can be tricky sometimes, but actually as often as not, when it's your truth and when it's from the heart, when it's real, nobody can really argue with that. When we really truly honor ourselves, we put down clear boundaries about what's okay, what's not okay. What role am I going to play now? It tends to happen. And particularly also when you have the perspective yourself of, however somebody else is responding to you or reacting to you, it's more to do with them than you. I'm not responsible for how anybody else reacts or responds. Naturally, so long as there's respect coming from me, which is the base of any relationship, foundation of any relationship, that's theirs, and it's not my responsibility to make it okay for them. And maybe, and more likely, whatever they're experiencing is what they need at that time too, and that's really, but also already established relationships can deepen. This is true also, and it may model what others are looking for and what others are curious about. I remember friends of mine, very close friends of mine, saying to me, "We don't know what you're doing, but everyone sees it. Everyone's watching," And I guess in a way, like true friends, the real relationships, they'll be happy for you because they'll feel it, and they'll still be there, no matter how different the roles are, Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. The ones that are, because there is a bit of a frequency in relationship to others, in terms of, there's some that remain in our frequency, whether they're in the same path that we're on or not, but there's something kind of binding us together. And then there's others that naturally fall out of that frequency. They're in another space, another place, and they do naturally shift away.
Yeah.
One of the things, as you were sharing your story, it as we do in retrospect, it kind of all seems like it's going up and to the right. On your healing journey, you're kind of just healing more, shedding more, letting go of more, discovering new things, meeting your eventual wife. What were some of those dips? Recognizing that even when we're on this transformational journey, it's not just up and to the right. It's it's up and then down, and then up and then down.
Absolutely.
What were some of those low points that you had along the way?
Oh, well, there have been a few, and like several in different ways. I mean, there's your own stuff that you're faced with nose to nose, and you're really, when a certain amount of healing takes place, that's tested. Is this really? Have you worked through this? Let's see. Life is kind of playful that way. And that's great when you can see then, oh, this is different now. But I guess early on in particular, and it can happen sometimes, there's a very human tendency, particularly when we're in a place early, when we starting to work on ourselves, where you come across a teacher or a coach or a guide or whatever that person may be, and there can be a temptation just to hand over your agency. Okay, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. This guy has got it together and he knows exactly what I'm supposed to do. I'm just going to do what he tells me. And a lot of people can fall into that. I certainly did. And that was actually totally a part of the journey also. That was part of, it worked for a while, but it got to a point I saw this very much in hindsight. We need to reclaim. This journey is also about reclaiming ourselves, all parts of ourselves that we have given away, in different ways. It's not just to a teacher or a guru or a coach, but we can give our parts of ourselves away to relationships that maybe aren't serving our highest good. Maybe there's a toxic relationship or negative situations, and when things are on our minds and bothering us, they're living inside us. They've got a part of us, So it's about reclaiming those parts of us, so that there's nothing really has us anymore. So, like in the past, reclaiming that my agency again from those that I handed it over to, because I felt I didn't know what I was doing, and I need to just follow somebody else. So that was that experience, and I've experienced that a couple of times. But in that reclaiming my agency, my sovereignty, my energy, there is you grow beyond that the next time. So there's a dip, but it brings you to the next level. And also there's a lesson that no matter how much work that we do in ourselves, how much experience we have, how far we may be seen to be gone along the journey, you're never done. Stuff can always come up. The ego, the hurt, injured parts of the ego are always with us. They run deep. And the healing energy can be extremely powerful, extremely charged. And when we're in an environment where our deepest wounds are opened and triggered, that we can act out on those again in a very hurt way, that can perpetuate, So a good dose of humility and perspective that really we're all on this journey for as long as we're breathing, and we are. There's no hierarchy, even though for a long time there was. On retreat last year in Florida, I always remember Leon. One of the first things he said on that retreat was, "The day the guru is finished." It really does feel like that. It's in this work. It's so vitally important for all of us to claim our own agency and sovereignty, not to hand over our decision making, our where our energy is brought to, our focus, where we place our focus, that we are in. We are agents of that. That is our energy, and that is our potentiality, and not to be giving it away. And for for when people have those experiences of, being tested or apparently falling from positions, to hold them in compassion also. There can be great teachings through the most difficult of experiences. And those experiences can be role modeled by who our teachers are sometimes. So when our teachers fall, when they go through challenge, and when they may not appear to be acting out of integrity, this too is a teaching for us, and it's important for us to see it that way also, not to make it a judgment on it, or not to make things, allow people away with not acting in integrity, but everything is a lesson. Everything is a lesson. And just out of, aside from the work and the intentional transformation journey, just in life as well, a really challenging time where all of this, everything I experienced was, and everything that I learned was put into practice, was when Sarah and I were expecting our first child, and there was a prenatal fatal fetal diagnosis, and it was at a stage about 24 weeks, which was a real hammer blow to us. We were, doctors are incumbent, they must tell us what the worst case scenario may be. And what we were told was just shook us to our core. And it was soon after the abortion referendum here in Ireland that allowed women to have abortions here and not have to travel to the UK for abortions. So doctors also must present this as an option. And we were told that we might want to consider that also, because of the huge challenges that not only what we would face, but what our child would likely face. And it was, so she was diagnosed with tubular sclerosis complex, which is where benign tumors, or tubers as they're called as well, can form on any of the major organs, causing all sorts of difficulties, particularly when they're in the brain, and they can show up in the heart. So Annie was born, they detected two big tubers blocking a valve in her heart, and when she was born they didn't know if she would be able to breathe or not. So there was a lot of complications and precautions taken. Sarah was going through her own difficulties as well with hypertension. So we went in for checkup 6 weeks before the due date, and Sarah was kept in for hypertension, and she was really not feeling well. She was not herself at all, and it was decided that Annie would be induced as an emergency birth, and there was a full pediatric cardiac team in the delivery room with us. So and we spent the next so Annie was born. She was able to breathe. She was brought right to pediatric ICU, and where she remained for a couple of days. And over those few days, it was decided that she needed a procedure done in her heart. And this is very rare, never really been done before, and there were no statistics for success. So she was baptized on day 3 in the ICU, just in case, and meanwhile Sarah was in a different hospital down the road because there wasn't a place for her. So Sarah wasn't even able to hold her for the first 3 days, on top of everything she was experiencing. So fortunately that procedure was successful. She was in the ICU for another few days, another procedure to undo the first one, not because anything was wrong, but because it was a kind of a second stage of the procedure. That was successful, and we spent the next month in hospital in Dublin, the other side of the country, before we came home with Annie, luckily. And that was 7 years ago. She just turned 7 last week, and she has surpassed far beyond any kind of best case scenarios even that the doctors could have hoped for. Never mind the worst case scenarios. She has a number of things that we're still monitoring all the time, but apart from a slightly bigger belly because of enlarged kidneys, you wouldn't know that there's anything going on with her at all. She does cartwheels all around the place, does gymnastics, and does all the things a little 7-year-old girl should and can do. So that whole experience really put us in a place of having to call in the practices and, hold perspectives from deep awareness of, what's going on here, even not just at a human level, at a soul level, including Annie, including this little soul that's coming into the world. What is all this about, And not that we found answers, but just the experience of the whole thing, from a place of from a place of love, holding the question, what would love do in this situation? If love is here, what does that mean? And sometimes there's nothing that we could possibly do except hold ourselves in that place, from that position, from a place of love, and be with what's happening, be with what is, and experience the emotions and navigate the situation as best you can. And always in every part from a place of love, and what we've learned from that is that really just things can be okay, not only okay, things can resolve and happen in ways that we cannot at times foresee or cannot imagine. Things can have a really mysterious, magical way of working out that could never be planned and could never be done by me or anybody else, but from a place of holding and operating from a place of love, and being open to whatever that means. Life can really surprise you.
Yeah, Ger, I can't even imagine going through that. That's the hardest thing a parent can experience, those worst case scenarios with what I'm sure the prognosis was. I mean, Annie's an absolute miracle baby, a miracle child, in fact.
Absolutely. Yeah, she is. When we were in hospital that time, we were being visited by student doctors every other day because there was everyone in the hospital was talking about this Annie because of her case, her really unique case. And actually, all of those complications that happened really early on, and the medication that she was put on to shrink those tumors on either side of the valve in her heart, that medication, which was a micro dose of a chemotherapy, she was too young to have an MRI scan, but they told us that they would also affect any other tubers present in her system. And much later on, I think when she was about 4 years old, she had her first MRI scan. And it showed this, so that treatment worked. It shrank the size of those tubers. So we knew that tubers anywhere else would be shrunk too. And there were signs of where lesions, there were lesions on the brain, which were signs that there would have been tumors growing there also in the brain. And so if that had happened, there would have been that would have been an entirely different situation, from, behavioral difficulties, learning difficulties, to epilepsy, to God knows what. And so she has actually, because of the early complications and the treatment she received at that time, she's much better off now than if she hadn't had that. So it's really
Unbelievable.
amazing how things work out. Yeah. Yeah. So actually we're in a place of being thankful for it happening just the way it did. Yeah.
Choosing is maybe a big word here, the right partner. And I mean choosing because sometimes we don't really choose the partner. We kind of, in my estimation, we attract them. And it sounds like you and Sarah came together exactly when you needed to come together. And for you to have navigated what you navigated with Annie, and also just the way that you entered into relationship right after many years of, I'm sure, yearning and wanting to be in partnership and wondering, will I ever be with someone? In retrospect, what have you learned about partnership, about finding the right person around, just being in alignment with that human being that you are choosing to live side by side with?
Yeah. I better choose my words carefully here. But really, I mean, what a huge question. I mean, if I was even aware of how to ask a question like that earlier in life, well, things might just be the very same as they are. But this this is reflecting on what makes a relationship powerful, I suppose, and sacred. Even that's probably how I would describe our relationship, actually. So yeah, recognizing. So the journey is what has bonded us, really. Us recognizing, you mentioned frequency earlier on, and that was totally true. I mean, I guess because in some ways our backgrounds are very similar, and our traumas are quite similar. Not exactly the same, but similar. And so we don't always attract what our kind of our shining qualities are, if you like, or what we want other people to see. But at a very subconscious level, we attract those maybe whose wounds are similar, or maybe there's a connection in a way where there's a healing that can take place in relation to the other. And this is another aspect of of healing that can take place in us. It's not just us working on ourselves, but us being in relation with others, whether that's an intimate partner or friend or family, but certainly in an intimate partnership, there is a massive opportunity for healing to take place. And that can take place in unconsciously, or it can be very intentional also. And we have experienced each other's shadow, our traumas, our deepest fears, that we have not shown anybody else, and almost definitely for many years hid from ourselves. But holding one another again from a loving place, not holding on to the other, but holding one another in our experiences, giving one another permission to work things out ourselves and with one another, recognizing that. And this is a really difficult part, in close relationships, not taking things personally. is really, really tough, because it's, by their very nature, they are deeply personal. And that what is happening with someone else is 99% of the time it's their stuff that we may be showing them or they're showing us. But it's for us to have that awareness, to catch that and work on it. And thank God we're both very much on the same page there. And I know you asked earlier on, when starting off in this journey, what can change in relationships. And I've seen it many times when one person in a relationship is working on themselves, if the other person isn't, that relationship doesn't always last very much longer, and it's a, particularly when, again, from my experience, when we have 2 young kids together, we're not just doing it for ourselves, we're doing it for our children also. And recognizing, it's not about us being perfect partners, perfect parents, but the healing that we do, then we save our children from being passed on what we don't heal. And those hurts from me, those hurts and pains from my parents and their parents, because it all filters down until it gets healed, So and we're relational beings, we don't live in isolation. We're not born out of isolation. It's not possible.
No. Yeah. The biggest gift we can give our kids is out of our own healing and getting out of our own way as much as possible. I mean, they're always going to have their own stuff to contend with in their own way. But if we, I think about inheritance a lot. We think about it in terms of wealth and finances. But the biggest gift that I can give my children is not money, but a regulated nervous system, but space to allow them to be themselves, not adding more into the mix. Right. And that's what I'm hearing you and Sarah are really intentional about, and in fact, so much so that you all decided as a family to move out into isolation into a teeny tiny island off the west coast of Ireland. Can you talk more about that decision to move into that place?
Yeah. So it was, so where we're living now is a small island. It's one of a group of islands, 3 islands called the Iron Islands. This one's called Inishmaan, which literally means the middle island. It's kind of the other 2 are either side of it on the west coast of Ireland. And Sarah's mother is from here. And it's very close to Galway, where we met, Sarah and I, and where we lived for many years. And so since we got together, we've been coming out here. And Sarah's mother moved back out here about 10 years ago. And it's a really special place. It's an easy journey to get here, but the nature of an island can feel a lot farther than how the distance geographically. So it was 2 years ago. We were looking at schools for Annie, because she was going to be starting very soon. And we actually had decided, we were in Galway and we couldn't decide where to base ourselves, but knew we wanted to be somewhere else. So we started in Portugal, and we moved to the Algarve 2 years ago to explore, see what it would be like and what might be possible there. So we spent 4 months living in the south of Portugal, and we, that was a whole other journey for us together. The people we met were incredible. It was an amazing time for the kids. Travel for children of a young age is so expansive. It really opens their mind and their experience. And between the jigs and the reels, we felt that Portugal probably wouldn't work. We didn't want to be on the mainland, and we didn't want to live in a city. and we had the summer to decide, so we spent the summer here on Ishman. There was a place in the school. There are only 12 kids in the school, so it's basically like private tuition. There was a place for us to stay, so we decided to give it a go and see what it would be like for the first year of Annie's education, through the Irish language as well, by the way. So she's already bilingual, and it's been amazing. Not without its challenges, but it's been really rewarding. It's a really small island, 4 kilometers in length by 2 kilometers wide. 160 people living here all year round. Lots of visitors in the summer, but there's a real sense of community here. Pretty much everyone on the island knows each other. It's really safe. The kids have freedom that is incredibly rare these days. A freedom that most kids don't experience anymore in Ireland. Probably closer to what I would have experienced growing up. We're really steeped in nature here. I'm looking from side to side. There's 2 huge windows here. I'm looking out across the island. We're steeped in nature. We're at the mercy of the weather, coming and going on the boats, supplies coming and going on the cargo. There's a sense of the ancient here as well. There are 2 prehistoric forts on the highest points of the island that are overlooking us. You can see them from every part of the island. And there's a great sense of mystery there because no one really knows who built them. And these islands, and the west coast of Ireland in particular, I mean, through history, it's been regarded as the edge of the world and a place of isolation and retreat, where people will come for isolation, for contemplation. There are many monastic settlements here, and lots of history and tradition of contemplation and reflection, and attuning to nature and slowing down to match the pace of nature. Because that's I feel that certainly Sarah and I, and definitely through the work that we've done on ourselves, the pace of modern life for us is not optimal, if you like. The busyness and the rushing and, doing all the things and getting all this stuff, and filling up your time with all of the things that there are to do. It's a much simpler life here. And we do, connection is really important to us as well. There's a powerful community here, but connection to our family and friends who are not far away. It's important for us to maintain that also. And other communities that we wish to connect with, and actually over something else that's made my work possible in the last 6 years or so is the accessibility that this technology has afforded us, and the possibility to connect with so many more people across the world, to study with, train with, experience. So it's a really amazing contrast of being in a remote kind of outpost, if you like, physically and geographically, but still being able to connect with the whole world. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Speaking of technology, and you have 2 young children, how are you thinking about this AI revolution and the world that your kids are going to step into
Yeah.
in the near future?
Yeah. This is ever present with us in terms of, and not even AI, but screens and devices, cameras. There are cameras everywhere now. And, particularly children, when they get a little bit older, there's more, getting more and more up to mischief and using technology in ways that are not always mature or responsible, and we must safeguard that. And AI brings a whole other level to it now as well. But to answer your question, it's even more vitally important now than ever before for us to be able to go inside and connect with ourselves, understand ourselves, know ourselves, to be able to be without looking for distraction, without looking for external answers or voices or validation or entertainment, to be self-sufficient and sovereign in your own agency, that we don't need anything external. So much of AI is, it's obviously much more than entertainment, but there's a tendency in the modern world to look outside of ourselves. And really that's comes from a distraction of not trusting ourselves and not being able to be with ourselves. So teaching our children to, you mentioned it earlier on, just be with their emotions, hold them in that, hold them in their upset, hold them in their highs and hold them in their lows. And so there can be a tendency, and maybe this happens early in childhood, when a child is upset and the caregiver naturally wants to make them feel better and to stop crying, stop the upset. But I think that's the start of resisting bad or negative emotions. And I don't see it that way at all, by the way, that judging an emotion as good or bad, but just emotions are to be experienced. It's information for you to tell you how you feel about a situation. And for children to be allowed to experience their emotions, feel them, cry, be upset, get frustration and anger out of their body, whatever way that looks, even if that's stomping the ground or kicking a wall, holding them in that they are able to express themselves. And also, say what they want, say what they need. That's not to say that they need to get everything they want all the time, but at least to be able to recognize what they want and ask for it, and be able to say yes to things, be able to say no to things, and honor that no as a boundary, and honor that boundary. Because I think that's something else that happens in early childhood that has implications later in life, where a child's no is not honored. And so then later in life we hear about, consent is a huge issue, where people really have an inner self-belief that my no isn't valid. So children are so delicate and formative, and the impressions that we leave on them are with them the rest of their lives. So for a parent to, as best as we possibly can, to hold them in a safe place where they can learn to regulate themselves, without a need for anything external to fix or numb or distract or validate. I feel like those things are what makes us human. And coming back to what is more and more human is what differentiates us from AI. That can never be conscious or feel how we feel or even have a soul. That's all of this. I know there are some out there who argue whether AI can have a consciousness or not, but I know that there is nothing that can replace a human being, a human heart, a human experience, and that we must learn to partner with it, but again, not give over our agency to something that is more intelligent, or the owners of that something that is more intelligent than we are. So there's to hold on to our own agency, our own sovereignty, recognize the value and importance of that. I think that's really the lesson to teach the kids. That is theirs. That is their God-given right. And that can be given away. It can be taken away, even without us realizing it. And I think that's what we're all facing right now.
Yeah, which is why especially these first 10 years of our kids' lives are so vital in establishing that foundation of self-awareness, of self-regulation, of autonomy, so that as they move into the inevitable world that we're moving into, they have a base foundation of understanding and can use whatever tools are out there as tools rather than being beholden by them, because there's parts of them or there's holes inside of them that are needing to be filled by their mind in self-preservation. Right. And so this is where just the having conscious parents, and that is something that I'm so optimistic about in my relationships with other parents and these conversations, is that there are so many conscious parents out in the world, thankfully, raising conscious children that I think are giving them the skill set, the tool set needed to confront the world that we're stepping into collectively.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we all, again, it's a very human thing to act out our hurts in the real world, in our relationships, professionally. But if we can raise our children doing our own work and our own healing, so that stuff is not passed on to them, and they are held in a safe, conscious, loving environment, and they don't have all the stuff from the parents or the grandparents and beyond, or even collectively as well. Imagine what the future leaders could be like, who are operating from a place of wholeness in themselves, not of any pain or hurt, but of being healed, being aware, and operating from an open heart and toward a greater good for everybody. And that's totally possible.
Yes. What do you feel are the biggest challenges that leaders face in leading from a more whole, centered, connected place?
Today, the pace of everything today is so fast, and it feels like it's getting quicker because people feel the need to keep up with progress and how things are changing on all of the different levels, whether it's technology, geopolitics, environment, population change. Leaders are grappling with so much, and as well as their, obvious performance obligations, which are not going away. So much is still down to the bottom line and what the numbers say, and how can more be done with less. It's it's a real challenge that, and then, you know, the space, where is the space and the time for the self and for this work for the leaders? I mean, the leaders at the highest levels recognize how vital this work is in not what they can do, but how they're turning up and what they have the capacity for. And it seems like the higher up they go in places, the more that they recognize that if leaders at early stages in their leadership would recognize this also, not so much the capacities and skills for doing more, doing differently, but what something like the transformational journey can offer them, or vertical development, or healing, or whatever way you want to call it. Making the space for that, and then maybe facing, well, what does this mean now for me? What's important for me now? You know, what are my values now? If I'm doing this work and taking it seriously in terms of the transformational work and the healing work, what are my values now? And who do I want to be? Where do I want to go myself? Where do I want people to follow me to? Is it the same as what it was 5 years ago? You know, so there's lots of shit, and that can have huge implications. And that's scary when you've got a lifestyle that needs to be paid for because you've been so successful, and you gotta keep up the Joneses. It's not for the faint-hearted, and that's probably why maybe it's not so popular sometimes. And it's just an easier thing to keep going with the same way it's always been, the status quo. But I think we're getting to a point where the status quo can't sustain for too much longer, and change is coming on multiple levels, whether we like it or not. So I think it's for leaders to get their heads around that and what's possible. And I think it's starting, because this work is becoming more and more visible in the workplace, in online, even places like LinkedIn, and at the highest levels. It's really, I'm so emboldened by what I'm hearing people talk about and what I'm reading online and how it's being responded to. You know, this work is really, it's really innately human work. It's for all of us, and it's for everybody, and we can all take to it, and we can all embark on the journey, and it has meaning and impact for all of us. It's just the moment who really is aware of it as even a possibility and what it can mean for them.
Yeah. You know, I think a lot of what's going to happen is the world is going to change. Structures are crumbling. Things are going to evolve from where they're at today. And ultimately, leaders are not going to have any other choice but to step into a deeper realm and ask deeper questions, because the structures and systems that had been in place and that previously worked no longer are. AI, technology, all of that is going to replace a lot.
Yeah.
And so in so many ways, this work, this deep transformational work that you and I are so embedded in, is inevitable, because if the outside world is no longer serving its place, it's no longer working, which is ultimately what happens in any transformational journey, is that our external world, the ways that we have been approaching life, no longer work, thankfully, because even though it feels very uncomfortable, even though it's quite disruptive, it leads us into a much deeper, more fulfilling, connected, true place within us, right? And in relationship with the rest of the world. And so that's where I do sense we're heading, in that there's going to be some proactive leaders, some proactive people that are currently waking up to this reality and taking proactive steps. The majority, however, are going to be taken kicking and screaming into into the depths. And in so many ways, those of us that have proactively taken these steps are going to be the way showers, the holders of the space for these individuals as they transition into a new way of being, right, in a new
Absolutely.
world.
Absolutely. And those, those who will be dragged kicking and screaming have a number of options which direction they will be dragged kicking and screaming,
Sure.
because
Sure.
it can be the human option, the human path. That is what you're talking about, or it's the path run by AI, run by the companies that own AI, and you've said so much there. You're absolutely right. I heard elsewhere it's the age of the knowledge worker is over. Now is the age of the wisdom worker. And it's absolutely true. And that wisdom comes through the inner work. It comes through relating and relationship. And it comes through the sacred also. This is really what's being asked of us right now. And I know there will be huge chaos and disruption and possibly collapse, but there is great possibility for this to work in again from a place of love and maybe a little bit of naivety. That's okay with me. This can be really magical for us in ways that so much work can be taken off our hands. And so what does this free us up to do? And what are the possibilities then? There are lots of, just to give a couple of examples, there are so many children in the world today who are not at home with their parents throughout the day, who are packed into crowded rooms with a whole pile of other kids. Best intentions are there, of course, but their childcare, particularly in Ireland, childcare is a huge issue. When both parents, it's demanded of both parents to work and to pay for all of the trappings of modern life. The elderly also, a growing older population, and not all of our elderly can or should be put into nursing homes or institutions. So caring for one another is the opportunity, and it's just some of the opportunity. There's so much more.
So much more.
Yeah.
So much more. Ger, as we move into the close here, what insight, question, tool might you share with the listener, that coach, that leader that is listening to this, as they navigate their own transformational journey?
So really, the greatest tool or instrument at our disposal for each of us is our body, really. And for us to develop a practice of turning our attention inward and simply noticing what's happening inside, noticing what's happening physically in our body, in all of the different parts of our body, noticing what's happening emotionally in the present moment, whatever is going on, whatever story is going on in your head, whatever you might be worried about coming down the line. But in the present moment, bringing your attention to your breath, noticing what's happening in the body, and being with that, noticing what arises when you notice. Even further, we know from quantum physics that the very act of observing something can change it. So this can actually open up a whole journey of experience inside that can unlock so much. And this is a big aspect of the work I do with people. And even just today, I had an incredibly powerful session with a very experienced, skilled coach who turned up with not a particularly distinct topic to focus on, feeling really good. And he was able to experience and open up to huge amounts of energy in his body that gave him a massive emotional release that wasn't only his but ancestral, and also brought an immense amount of clarity in himself and wisdom that came along with it. And this is accessible to all of us, just sitting here in a space with another person or other people with the same intention and awareness. It's so accessible to all of us. And it can begin just with that practice of turning your attention inward.
Ger, you are a man filled with hard-earned wisdom as a result of many years of practice, of work, of turning into yourself. You are walking the walk in stepping into this world as a leader and a way shower for those that are needing that support. So thank you. Thank you for everything that you shared in this episode. Thank you for being who you are in this world. Thank you for opening your heart to us. I really appreciate you for being on here with us.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's a real gift to share this space with you. And thank you for everything you do at the center with these podcasts and bringing these stories and these experiences to the world in this format. You do it beautifully, and you are, in your way, also a great way shower. So thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for being with us today. To learn more about today's guest, visit our podcast landing page at www.podcast.centerfortransformationalcoaching.com. You'll find links to their website, social media, and anything else they might want to share there. And if you're curious to explore more about our work, our trainings, or the deep coaching approach, you'll find everything at www.centerfortransformationalcoaching.com. A new episode of this podcast releases every 2 weeks, so please subscribe wherever you listen to stay up to date. Until next time, stay present, embrace love, and continue sensing into what life is calling you toward. See you soon.